There's never been a time in recorded monetary history where an unbacked currency doesn't hyperinflate. That means everything goes up. If you don't have metal in that scenario, you are destined to. Metals are screaming a very loud signal, and that is, when in doubt, save in real money. And we're there. We're in that final phase where the truth comes out that money is money and everything else is credit. Having lived through the 1980 panic manic modes, I would say that we're in the precursor to it. We're going to find true price discovery. When the physical demand for silver gets to the point where it sets the price, we will know the real price. Think about everything else silver is used for, all electronics and AI. Its value in a high-tech society is priceless. But if things go the way that they have in the past, you're going to be darn glad you have something real.
World War III is already happening.
This is a house of cards, and it is in the process of collapsing right now.
You're going to see an economic crash, the likes of which we've never seen.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Today, back on the channel, we have David Morgan from the Morgan Report, who's a renowned figure in the precious metals industry, widely recognized for his expertise in silver investing, founder of the Morgan Report and the author of the Silver Manifesto, decades of experience in economics and finance, a trusted voice on precious metals. We had you on, I believe it was in early April, and that was when silver had bottomed out in 2025. I recall, a lot of the great comments about how this video aged poorly, probably within a week of posting that video. And those people aren't really saying much right now. In fact, I assume that they're scrambling to try to buy some metal at the highs. So I gotta say, man, it sucks being so early. They say never be the first or last to do anything because you don't really get the recognition. The people who are getting the recognition now aren't even people. Like these AI-generated bots. It's crazy, man. So I want to get your perspective on the markets, how you're processing being in this generational move in silver, and just like how you've been doing.
Well, I've been doing really, really well. Thanks for coming back on the Canadian Prepper. And I just want to shout out before we start how much you've done for the community. I've listened to most of your podcasts through all the years. And another shout out is buying a couple things from you. I bought some of the food items that you have. And also, as I told you last time, I've got that winter coat from, I forget what it's called, but it's from Canada.
Outdoor Survival Canada.
Yeah. And that baby, when you're minus 20 in Montana, believe me, that thing works great. So
they're amazing coats.
Amazing.
So one thing we do well here.
You do a lot. So the bottom in 2025, as you mentioned, April, I wrote that letter. I have a team, but I always write the editorial myself. And I said, look, gold has really made a move. I've been saying for a couple of years that the run to gold has begun, even though the price wasn't moving all that much. We're in the 2000s when I started making that statement. And then we saw the central banks buying gold hand over fist. So I said this big run has begun. And then we saw $3,500 gold in April. But silver really hadn't moved that much. And I told all my paid premium members, look, gold is going to flatten at 3,500 throughout the summer and perhaps longer. If you're going to add or move further into this field, buy silver, buy platinum, or swap gold into platinum or silver or both. Well, I hit it. Silver and platinum took off shortly after I published the April edition of the Morgan Report. The gold did go flat for the entire summer. And as we both know, gold had performed well into the beginning of the year, but by the end of the year, both platinum and silver are up roughly 145% for the year, which is, phenomenal return. Just to add one more thing and give it back to you, Nate. I've said for decades that 90% of the move comes in the last 10% of the time. And a lot of people would troll me on that. I really don't care because I know markets. Am I perfect? No, I'm human, but I'm pretty damn good at what I do. And we're there. We're in that final phase where the truth comes out that money is money and everything else is credit. And everything that's based on credit, the deeper you're in credit, probably the further you have to fall. And what's on credit? Almost all commercial residential real estate, a lot of automobiles or car loans, a lot of people with credit cards at 20, 25%, for goodness sakes, are in dire straits. And I don't wish ill on anyone, but for my lifetime, I've been trying to teach people, get real, buy real, be real, buy real money, be real, be authentic to yourself, and let's go from there. So back to you.
Yeah, I just want to correct you on one thing. We had you on when I think silver had touched $29 an ounce. Here we are today at 90. So we're at a solid 200% doubling or tripling, I guess that would be, of what metals were at that time. So, congratulations for anybody who was able to think strategically and not get caught up in kind of just what they're seeing on a screen. It's really hard to see, the fundamentals sometimes in this age of noise. But sometimes you just have to really look at the big picture and look at, okay, where are we going geopolitically? And for me, it's just common sense that we're going to need stuff. If the military is saying, hey, we got to build all these data centers and we're going to integrate everything with AI and we need to build more weapons, and Trump is like mandating that companies build more weapons. I mean, it's obvious that they're going to need the raw materials. I was talking to a broker, and they said they had 7,000 orders like that are pending. 7,000 orders for physical metals. And this is they're probably one of the bigger ones here in Canada. But still, I mean, that's just insane. So are we approaching the top? Is this mania yet? Or what do you think? Give me your honest perspective.
Yeah. Well, I've been, I'm sitting in this chair a long time, and I've always tried to be as objective as possible. And then knowing how markets move and having lived through the 1980 finale, the build up to it, I was actually working on my master's in finance at that time and had a pretty big chat with the one of the top professors in that course or in that degree. And she said, she was the first one to call me a silver expert, but I don't want to digress too far. But I remember the panic manic mode. And having that little bit of experience, I would say that we're in the precursor to it. The reason I say that is that we're valuing silver not as credit, but as something real. So if I look at silver as a unit of value versus the stock market, we're far from the panic manic phase.
Wow.
If I look at it in terms of almost anything else other than oil, silver is still very undervalued. So if, as a thought experiment, we could see, let's say $100 silver, which is pretty close, and it's undervalued relative to the stock market. So the stock market could fall in half, which wouldn't shock me. And that would mean it'd be like silver doubling. But no, it hasn't doubled. It's maintained the $100 marker. But in terms of how much stock it buys, it's doubled. Apply that to real estate. Apply that to, let's say, automobiles or these trucks. And I'm sure Canada's similar to us. I got to digress a minute, but I was thinking about getting a new truck. And yeah, I could afford it, but holy moly, you get that truck, not super decked out, it's almost $100,000. I mean, my dad bought a house when I was in the 7th grade for $35,000. 3 houses equal 1 truck today. That shows you how bad inflation is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's getting out of control. Do you think that this year we're finally going to see things reach their real valuation in terms of the stock market? Are we going to see a pullback? Or it seems like everything is kind of hyperinflating, like everything is at record highs. Real estate, the stock market, gold, silver. Are we just going to see a melt up? Or is it actually going to be a crash at some point when people fail to pay their debts, or the U.S. defaults, or Where do you see this going this year? Are we
excellent question, and one I do struggle with some. But we do have history, and there's never been a time in recorded monetary history where an unbacked currency doesn't hyperinflate. Which let me reiterate what you just said. That means everything goes up. Stocks keep going up, real estate keeps going up, automobiles cost, but none of them keep pace with the true inflation rate other than gold and silver. I did a lecture years ago, I'm going to try and find it, on the Weimar Republic and what happened in the final phases of that. And people were buying stocks hand over fist because it was much better than keeping their money in the bank, but it still didn't protect them. The only thing that protected them were gold and silver. And are we going to go into that phase? I certainly can't rule it out. So I don't have an idea either way. The market knows more than me. I've said that for years. My tendency based on history is no, we are going to go into similar to a hyperinflationary mode, which is very unfortunate because what happens in that scenario is that we give up on the currency. No one trusts it anymore. I want to sell a piece of property, for example. I don't have a dollar price. I don't have a Canadian dollar price. I'm going to sell that for this many ounces of silver. Or I want your truck and I want, 2 years of survival food. And I want your kid to work for me for 6 months and say deal, that kind of thing. I mean, that sounds bizarre, but when you lose faith in the currency, it's very difficult to get.
We're faced with a situation where there's a potential psychological fallacy that's going to happen where people are going to think they're getting richer, but they're actually getting progressively poorer. And when you look at, like how much gold and silver have went up in the last 25 years compared to the S&P 500, I mean, there's no greater proof than that. If you had simply bought gold and silver and forgot about it, you'd be richer than if you had, tried to nickel and dime the markets for 25 years. And that's really saying a lot that, people think that they're getting richer. It seems like there's a lot of last ditch moves being made here, like Trump putting a credit interest limit on various credit card debt for 1 year. We don't even know if he can legally do that. When is that going to take effect? You have this spat with Jerome Powell and the Fed chair, and so what do you make of how the U.S. administration in particular is trying to mitigate these coming crises, financial crises?
It absolutely revivifies or adds to the idea of the end game. I think Rafi Farber uses that term, and I agree with that. I like that term. And all of history shows us that we get more and more bizarre, unbelievable reactions to the end of the Age of Empire, the currency crisis. And this is what we're witnessing. I mean, first of all, if you go back, even the decade, and you see what's a competition to the current currency system, the big thing was Bitcoin. The first, I've got an alternative to the central banking system. It's this anonymous private peer-to-peer monetary system, which now it's basically the opposite of what it was purported to be from the initial white paper. But you get my point. As inflation gets worse and worse, people are inventive. They're ingenious, and they have a survival instinct, both financial survival instinct and a true survival instinct. So this is what we're witnessing. And the more rapidly they make these edicts, a credit card limit here, credit there, and all the bizarre activity that's taking place under the current administration is just proof of my whole point that the further we go to the end, the more bizarre things become.
Is there anything right now that kind of irritates you in the precious metal analyst space? I know you've kind of talked about how people are hyping certain things up, and you tend to be a bit more of a pragmatist, which is why I like having you on. You're not trying to embellish anything. You're not trying to use hyperbole to hype things up and saying that silver is going to reach these insane valuations. But what are the biggest myths that you would say are currently circulating in the AI silver space in particular, because it seems to have been hijacked by these artificial intelligence bots. Yeah. Is there anything right now that you can say about the scourge of AI content and perhaps just, these kind of charlatans coming out of the woodwork?
Well, thanks for the platform to do that. Number one, and this is the one that's, I will get a lot of feedback from people that are not knowledgeable. The banks are not naked short. That's the thing you hear all the time. The bank, they're losing billions. The banks may be naked short a little bit, but banks mitigate risk. Banks are the one that invent derivatives. Banks are the one that's come up with all these bizarre option strategies like strangles and collars and all these things. I'm not trying to be any better than anyone, Nate, but I know my shit. And the banks are not naked short. That's the biggest. The other one is this, there's 300 ounces of paper silver for every ounce that's, physically available. That's a hard number to determine. And at one time it was around 100. But currently, it's more like 10 to 1. That's a lot of leverage. I mean, if you're making a bet at the casino and you got, one chance in 10 of winning, those odds are not in your favor. But they're not 100 to 1 or 300. So that's another one. The other one is more esoteric, like there's been a lot of secret meetings. That's bullshit. There's been this filing in the CME code. I looked that one up. The actual number was correct, but what it said was nothing close to what the AI said it meant. So you do have to be careful. Look, the way I want to be very clear, the truth about gold and silver is so absolutely positive. You don't have to embellish anything.
Yeah, I'm not sure where or who is behind these bots. If it's for the purpose of inflating the price or trying to crash the price, or what sort of manipulation is going on in the background. But I agree with you. This isn't rocket science. You just look at the fundamentals, and it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. What do you make of the claims that there's going to be a massive failure to deliver? Because if we look at the COMEX deliveries in January of 2024, I believe they were around 7 million ounces. January of 2025 was around 11 or 12 million. And so far already this month, it's 36 million ounces. Is that at all significant? I don't know really a lot about how COMEX and deliveries work. Can you educate us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I have said, as many others, that we're going to find true price discovery, which is what we're in now, when the paper paradigm is superseded by the physical reality, which is a fancy way of saying when the physical demand for silver gets to the point where it sets the price, we will know the real price. Now, the market's always been, in a way, I'll say, somewhat misled or misunderstood, maybe is a better word, that the retail silver market was super important. It's important, but not super important. So you would see a lot of retail silver people, and I know a lot of them personally. Oh, no. Running out of silver, I can't get it, blah, 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 blah. Well, that was true within the context of a retail product. 100-ounce bar, a kilo bar, a 1-ounce wafer, a government coin, even a silver round. But in the context of the silver market, it is a derivatives market. Nothing more, nothing less. The 1,000-ounce bars are there on display and taken about 1% of the time. So 99% of the time, you just see silver resting in the eligible category that can't be touched for delivery. And the register category, which is the dealer's actual inventory that can be taken off the exchange or moved within the exchange from warehouse to warehouse or whatever. And that is a small part of the actual physical market. But the key is when those 1,000-ounce bars are in demand, and that demand is so strong that they've got to be moved about, now we are in the final game. where the physical silver market, based on the derivative, the 1,000-ounce commercial bars are required, and they have to be moved. And that's what we've seen. We've seen them go from London to United States, from the United States back to London, and obviously going into the Shanghai Exchange or Shanghai Metals entity. And this is because it appears, to the best of my ability to determine, that the Shanghai Metals Exchange and Shanghai Futures Exchange are demanding physical product, and they cannot get it, enough of it in time. And so there's a big run on physical metal in the silver category, not in silver retail. They could be together. You could have a shortage of silver retail, but it's a true commercial bar market that's going to set the price. And that's what's happening now. So I think there's enough silver to reach equilibrium. And I say think, I don't know. The market knows more than me. But we're sitting on a fair amount of silver in the COMEX, but not enough in London, and certainly not enough in China or Mumbai or India to satisfy the demand. And until those reach equilibrium, we're not going to know the true price of silver. And when we do, or if we reach equilibrium, then the market will calm down, and we will see, what the equilibrium price might be. But we may not get there for a while. And the problem is we're in a deficit, as you know, Nate. We've been there for 4 or 5 years. So if I am XYZ, or let's use Samsung, everyone's talking about the silver Samsung battery that charges your EV in 10 minutes instead of 2 hours. Those situations are, I'm going to find out how much silver I need in ounces, not how many dollars it costs for an ounce. I'm going to say to my logistics department, how much silver do we need for Samsung, all activities, for all electronics in a given year? Well, sir, we need 20 million ounces a year. How much do we have stored? Oh, about 2 months worth. I want you to go out. I want you to buy 2 years worth. I'm not going out of business. Samsung is going to make these batteries. Samsung is going to be in business, and we're not going to be out of business for lack of silver. I don't care. Do I have a limit price? You might put a limit price. Yeah, you can buy it up to $200 an ounce. I don't care what it costs. I want 20 million ounces, and I want it now, and I want it on our facility in our own warehouse. I mean, that sounds extreme, but any good business person is going to do that. It'd be like your business. I mean, are you going to be in a position where you can't produce survival food? Or if you are, it's okay, at 6 months, I'm out, folks. You come and get it while you can, that type of situation. So that's how these companies are thinking on the industrial side. They're not looking at charts. They're not looking at momentum. They're not looking at the AI bot talking silver. They're saying, how much do I need to stay in business and for how long? Because unless we get more mining, which is a 5 to 10 year ordeal in most cases, we are going to be short silver at some time.
Yeah, it seems like a self-fulfilling doom loop of sorts where scarcity becomes the issue as opposed to price, like you're saying, because even with a lot of these companies, the overall silver price compared to the relative cost of the vehicle is still a relatively small proportion. So whether the silver is 200 or 100, it's not going to make or break the company. They just need it so that their supply chain doesn't get bottlenecked. And so it's interesting to see that now everybody is hoarding it, probably out of geopolitical concerns as well. But then the other element here is that as people see the price going up, they want it as an investment. And I was talking to Bill Holter the other day, and I said, as silver gets lighter, it becomes almost a more enticing investment proposition because, $20 silver is pretty heavy to lug around. But $100 silver, I mean, it ceases to be entirely a poor man's, a metal, and it becomes more of like a middle class metal, I suppose you could say. Now people even talk about copper, which I think is weird, but we really are perhaps in the beginnings of a real vicious sort of scarcity cycle that who knows how high it could go. I mean, as a person who's kind of been in around the space for a long time, I'm not getting too excited about this kind of stuff because, as fast as it can go up, it can go down. And so I've always tried to encourage people to just keep a level head with things because, you don't want to get too excited and then the next day it crashes and, just focus on the fundamentals. Do you have any advice with respect to should people get in at this price level? Should they take a little off the table? What would you say in this situation?
That's a case-by-case basis. So anyone that's listened to URI over the last decade or 2 decades had bought, and hopefully they bought within a reasonable amount. In other words, 10%, 5%, something, relatively significant. I wouldn't do anything at this point other than, hold on or sell if you need to pay a bill or, whatever. People that are maybe overweighted, they might start looking at filtering out. You're not going to catch the exact top as an amateur ski. The best way the professionals do it is they filter in and filter out. So you accumulate, the markup comes, and then you distribute. So I've already put out for our paid people 2 scenarios, $100 US and $200 US. And you move out in tranches. And in both cases, Nate, you never sell it all. In other words, you have like a mini core position. But, if you're sitting there at, $29 silver when we did our last interview and it's tripled and it represented 10% of your portfolio and now it's 30% of your portfolio, it makes sense to rebalance it. Sell down some of the silver and buy something that's cheap like oil or energy stocks. And so that's the general guidance. I mean, it isn't one size fit all. David Morgan said this. I'm saying it, but it's got your own decision. But things can get overvalued, even silver. Silver is overvalued relative to oil, but really nothing else. So I'm not like, I'm going to swap my silver for a house. Silver isn't valued properly in that context. As far as getting in now, I would say yes, because what we talked about, I think the most important question, and they've all been important, Nate, is what if we go into a blow-off hyperinflationary phase? If you don't have metal in that scenario, you are destined to, I won't say the poorhouse, but hard times. And that's why, even though you might be in the stock market and you feel, as you said so well, I feel wealthy. Well, what's the problem? My house is going up and my stock portfolio is going up, but you don't realize the context of feeling a big number is providing wealth. When no, it's what is wealth and you don't have any. And in that context, I think everyone should even buy $100 silver. Should you buy everything and sell your house? But no. But whatever savings you have that's pretty liquid, like maybe some of your stock portfolio or maybe savings account or what else could you have? I don't know. Stamp collection, I don't know. But liquidate some of that into real metal. How much? Now, I'd shoot for 5%. If you've got, $50,000 liquid net worth, I'd shoot for $5,000. I'd probably put it into silver over gold or split it between the two. Is that insanity? No. Are you buying too high? Maybe. But if things go the way that they have in the past, where we get an inflationary blow-off, a true currency crisis, and the banks can get a handle on this in time, you're going to be darn glad you have something real. Like I said, be real, buy real, act real.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in time, like you said, that the markets could continue to go up. What does that really mean in real terms? I mean, I would say if there's not something tangible that you can jump into, that maybe it is a property somewhere that you feel is fairly priced, or something physical, something material. I think at this point in what some people are saying is the beginnings of a commodities super cycle, then I would say, this is not financial advice, but myself personally, I would be reluctant to go into cash. But then the flip side of that argument is you look at people like Warren Buffett, who's now retired. So I don't know who is in charge of Berkshire Hathaway at this point, or what they're doing with these treasuries that they're sitting on. What do you make of the cash is trash? Is it still trash? And if so, why is the Berkshire Hathaway in so heavy on U.S. dollars at this point?
Yeah, well, it's the way the system is set up, Nate. I mean, I remember talking to one of my financial buddies. He does more on like the financing of mines and deals with, big funds and investment bankers. And I'm in that realm a little bit, but that was his mainstay. And we were talking years ago, and he showed, somebody from Saudi had contact with him and asked, hey, we're worried, what do we do? I said, well, you ought to get them into silver, And he said, okay. Now they bought up the entire above ground silver supply, and they still have, 8 times that much cash. Now what do they do, David? And it kind of hit me, not that I'm not smart enough to realize that, but it just shows you how small the silver market is and how much cash there is relative to the silver market. And just to dwell on that a little bit further, but Tavi Costa, who I really admire, I actually don't think I've talked to him one-on-one, but regardless, very smart young guy who runs Crescat Capitals, I understand. And he talked about the liquid ability of the financial markets at like $8 trillion. And you take 1% of that number, it's like $80 billion. Well, the silver market right now is about $90 billion. Silver market's 1 billion ounces at $90 the ounce. So 90 times 1 is 90 billion. Well, that's 1% of the liquid cash. You don't think in a financial breakdown that 1% of that money is going to want to buy silver? What if 2 or 3 or 4% want to buy silver? Where does that put the paper price? So I think your point is Buffett can't get out of paper. There's nowhere else to go. These guys have to believe the myth that paper is wealth, but it's not. If you could print yourself wealthy, Zimbabwe would be the wealthiest place on the planet. I got 100 trillion, or what is it, 100 trillion note I show every now and then, here in my drawer. And these things got printed and never used. Yeah, $100 trillion. By the time those things got printed and sent from Germany to Zimbabwe, the currency had collapsed. Those things never circulated. Now, is the US dollar going to do that? I highly doubt it. But the trend is still in place.
Is there a reason why they're not in stocks or something? There's got to be some place to park this cash. Or is there some sort of agreement with the U.S. government that they hold on to it? I mean, there's got to be some reason why they're expecting some kind of crash.
Well, I've studied Buffett,
but in the meltdown.
I've studied Buffett and his father, and I think very strongly that Buffett expects to see a stock market, I don't know, crash, but revaluation where it's worth putting cash back into the stock market, but it's overvalued now. I mean, the best scenario, and there's not a good one at this, but the best one is for things to get repriced under a quote unquote financial collapse. So housing's overpriced, it comes down to say 50%. Stock market's overpriced, it comes down 50%. Gold and silver continue up or maintain. So as I said earlier, you're buying twice as much stock. And these are real things. I mean, let's face it. A lot of stocks are puff, but a lot of stocks are real businesses. I mean, a utility stock. You're buying, water company. You're buying electric company. You're buying coal. These are real things we need. They're, stocks are what they are, but they're overpriced. So in a financial crisis, the wealth doesn't go away. It gets revalued. So people that have like real money and no one else has anything but credit, we get to negotiate. I'm buying your electric company. Yeah, well, it's $100 billion. Yeah, well, I'm giving you $25 billion, take it or leave it. Not that I deal in those kind of numbers, but, the industry does. And so, well, what have you got? Well, I've got this. So, I'm not saying we're going to be paying for everything in gold and silver. What I'm trying to convey is that there will be an adjustment, a massive one. And I think that's the way Buffett's betting. I don't think he's betting for the hyperinflationary currency crisis where the paper isn't trusted at all. I think he's trusting it because he believes that the markets will adjust from being overvalued to being fair value to being undervalued, and he can deploy that cash. Remember, no one ever tells or asks Buffett the right questions. He's always poo-pooed gold. It's, I don't think he's used the word pet rock, but it's, buried out of the ground and put in a vault and buried further. But no one talks about how many times Buffett's bought silver. Buffett's a big silver bull. Now, Charlie Munger didn't really like the fact that Warren was playing with silver. You got to remember, in 99, Buffett bought 130 million ounces of silver off the COMEX. And when I saw the filing of Berkshire Hathaway in 2000, I went through that financial statement very carefully. And you know what, Nate? The word silver never appeared in that statement. Yet he had bought almost 20% of the world's above ground silver supply, and it didn't show up in the financial statement, and he's required to report everything. You know what it came in, Nate? Miscellaneous. Why? Anything under 2% of your portfolio, you can just put the word miscellaneous to cover that purchase. And that's how he posted it in his financial statement. So that gives you, again, the idea
And that was
of
in
the
99
paper to silver ratio. And he bought that much silver, but it showed up in the financial statement as a miscellaneous investment.
So, yeah, if he bought that in 99, he's kind of laughing
he
right
sold
now.
it at $9. He bought it at like under $5. Well, here's what happened. Let me further the story. The silver got shipped to London, and then I was doing something, and one of my whales called me, pissed at me like crazy, because I was saying how much was in London. And he said, "You're wrong. I was there, you blankety blank blank." And I go, "Okay, well, let me find out." I kept my calm. And I called up one of the guys in Wall Street. I said, "What's going on?" I said, "Oh, that's Buffett's silver. That's not London's." "Oh, okay." So I called the guy back. But that 130 million ounces ended up being the basis for the SLV. So now the question becomes, did Buffett have a tie to the SLV that's under the table, gentleman's agreement, and all that? I would suspect that there is, but I can't prove that, Nate. But what I can prove is that Buffett bought 130 million ounces. It went to London. JP Morgan took over the 130 million ounces and started the SLV with, ironically, 130 million.
Interesting piece of history there. So what do you think could potentially break this system? Because it seems regardless of what happens, it always bounces back. We've seen the tariffs, then we've seen the taco, we've seen war after war, pivotal event after crisis. And it seems like no matter what, the market just doesn't care anymore. We're just completely detached from reality. So what is it? Is it the AI bubble? I mean, what kind of black swan event could possibly flip this table at this point? Because it doesn't seem like much is going to stop it. It almost seems like bad news is good news.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I mean, I think there's, we can weight it. In other words, there's more probability of this, and this than there is these other things. One of the highest probabilities is the repo market, the amount of money that's required overnight. People don't really understand the repo market. I'm not saying I'm an expert in it, but basically banks are required to have a certain amount of cash on their books when they close their books every night. And a lot of them don't have the right cash balance in order to meet the law. And so they say, "Hey, I need to borrow overnight $27 billion from you to have the right amount overnight before we start playing our financial games tomorrow." So Bank A lends to Bank B because they have excess reserves, and they loan it and they get an interest rate on it, and then they give the money back. You want to call it money, the currency, and the game goes on. Well, that number just keeps getting bigger and bigger because the market's getting more and more levered or leveraged all the time.
Yeah.
Now take that as one. Another one is the Japanese yen carry trade. So now we're in a position, and one of my friends in Chicago, and I can't remember his name, I give him credit, he was going to be short the yen forever. And he's right, just like me right on silver, but it's been a long time. But here it is. And so the Japanese yen is in dire straits. And their new finance minister looks as if she's got the Keynesian method of, we'll just print our way out of it, which will devastate the Japanese currency. And so I think we are going to see a currency crisis. It could blow up in the yen, it could blow up in the euro, it could blow up in the repo market, it could be all three at the same time. But I think there's going to be less and less trust for currencies generally, whether yen, dollars, Canadian dollars, or whatever. And that means they'll be seeking safety. Well, there could be perceived safety in the stock market. It keeps going up. Perceived safety in real estate. It keeps getting up. But the real safety is in the metals. And that's what we're witnessing. Metals are screaming a very loud signal and have been all of last year, you could say. And that is, when in doubt, save in real money everything else, as I keep saying, is credit, and credit could stall out. The banks close, the banks put up an interest rate that's untenable. Look at, I'll digress just a minute. I mean, to me, it's just unfathomable that they can charge the less fortunate, 17, 18, 20% for a near term. I mean, some of these people are using their credit card to buy food, for crying out loud. I mean, this really upsets me when I know these things, because it shows you how distorted the market is. I mean, digress a bit further. I mean, my mom never worked. My dad had a good job, worked, for 40 years and retired, but, it was a different era. I mean, now you can have two people working or work two jobs or even three sometimes and not make ends. That's pretty sad.
Well, to continue with that digression, what is your take on this Trump credit interest cap? Because some people say, well, that will disrupt the free market and cause destabilization. But I'm in agreement with you that sort of usurious practice is very damaging, especially to, the people who are struggling. So are you a proponent of having the government force, reduce those rates, or is that something that the free market should?
That's a real tough one for me, because it's using both sides of my brain. One is my analytical side, which I'm partial to, and free market rules and all that kind of thing. And the other part is more of the humanistic, spiritual side. And, one of my favorite books, I haven't finished it yet, is Eat the Bankers. It's Sinclair No, who I actually spoke to several times when he was still alive. And it builds the whole case against usury. And I'm reading that book, and I'm thinking, is usury even valid? I mean, if you didn't have interest on money, then where would we be? The whole thing, the bankers don't care about the principle. People don't understand this. It was in the film called The International. And there's a scene in there, I vividly remember, but one of the bankers was talking to the other one, saying that, well, they don't really care. I don't think he said his exact words, but he highly implies, well, the banks don't really care that much about the principal. All they care about is the debt and the payment of interest on the debt. Because when you owe us interest on the debt, we own you. We control you. Because if you can make the principal with a keystroke on a computer, but there's interest attached to it, you're the debtor. What's the Bible saying? Don't be, slave to the lender, whatever the expression. And that's the way the system runs. But if there wasn't usury, you wouldn't have that leverage. And if you're going to use the time value of money and interest rates and all these things that we have been taught in finance school, for example, then why not do it in-house? Why leave it to an outside private consortium of European bankers and build a non-constitutional Federal Reserve System when the Treasury should be doing it? And we should be loaning money to ourselves, and that interest that goes betters the people, that maybe that value of money gets put into a better food bank or better community services or cheaper health care or something that serves us rather than serves the bankers.
Yeah, I've never really understood the logic of the whole Keynesian system. It seems to be a bubble that just continues to inflate, and it's made of very durable material because the bubble seems to not be wanting to pop at this point. But, when I look around, I see people struggling. I see these tensions, I think, are manifestations, the dividing lines in the United States, the ICE stuff, the National Guard stuff, the poverty, the crime, the constant bickering and polarization. They all seem to be manifestations of an underlying economic tension that's there with people. And it seems like the governments are trying to put those issues at the forefront when really that's not fundamentally the problem. So to, get people fighting with one another as they go broke effectively, because like you're saying, this whole system has as its ultimate end, everybody's broke, everybody's a debt slave. And before you know it, you're fighting with your neighbor because the media told you to, and nobody realizes the person who's made out like a bandit. And so I I really have a bad feeling about how this is going to go. What are you seeing, in your neck of the woods, both literally and figuratively?
The town I'm in, Spokane, is not a real wealthy town. We're feeling it here. You can, just walking around that grocery store and keeping your ears open. You can, overhear things or whatever. I mean, it's in a restaurant, not a high end one at all, but, kind of one of these corporate restaurants. And, I was talking and whatever, and, I'm not an eavesdropper, but you hear stuff. And this guy was talking about he only had like $30 left in his checking account. And he was buying this dinner with a credit card. I thought, why would you do that? But from his perspective, maybe it's, hey, if I'm going to file bankruptcy, I may as well have, whatever. I mean, this is very detailed, Nate, but to answer your question better, yeah, it's very pervasive. It's everywhere. And it's even in, people you think might not be having a problem because they've got a newer car and live in a nice neighborhood and, they're dressed well. But it's all on, not all, but a lot of it, too much of it's on credit. And now that credit card bill is killing them because they got downsized or the wife lost the job and now they don't have two incomes, all these type of things. So I'd say very much so.
Well, that's the illusion, right? Because it does seem like I go through these poor neighborhoods and it seems like every other car kind of looks half decent, and these people have $1,000 phones in their pocket. And it's like, these are something that you couldn't have ever imagined back in the 80s and 90s, people having all these new cars and fancy phones when they're that poor. So people are, poor. It's just that they're making payments and they're barely just living paycheck to paycheck. And I think now people are starting to progressively go more and more underwater, which is why Trump had to put that 10%, cap on things just to stop, riots from ensuing.
Yeah, well, again, it gets back to the usury question. I mean, there used to be, I think it's state law in some cases, you can only go so high, and then, of course, the lawyers get in there and they finagle things and, some of these quick load outfits, they're really extorting people legally. It's very sickening. I'm going to digress for a minute, but there's two films that I would suggest that your viewers look at. One's called The Bank of Dave. It's on Netflix. It may be other places, and it is a sequel to it. And I forget the name of the sequel, but if you go to The Bank of Dave and look it up on the web, the second one had to do with this usury thing. And this woman had borrowed a modest amount, something like $500. And, a year and a half later, she owes $1,500, because of the way they compound the interest on the loan. It's just sickening.
Yeah. It's definitely not something that's conducive towards a long-term stable society. You probably are aware that the U.S. Geological Survey, they had added silver to the list of critical metals in November 7th, I think, of 2025. And we know that the Chinese recently are putting some kind of restrictions, or they're requiring licenses in order to export silver. How much of what we're seeing right now is geopolitical, war-related? Because you had famously said on the channel that silver is for war. That was kind of a centerpiece of our last conversation. And it seems as though that is definitely playing out because, as indicated, Trump is, mandating that the weapons manufacturing companies are accelerating their production, and everybody's increasing their proportion of their GDP that's geared towards military weapons procurement. What are your thoughts on these restrictions? And I have a follow-up question to that, but I'll get your thoughts on that first. With respect to, is that a sign that they're panicking, that they're really concerned about demand, that they're going to this extent, and is it tied in some way to potential hostilities with the Chinese and the Americans in the future?
So the critical minerals list, silver used to be a strategic resource, and they had a pile of silver in the owned by, I guess, the Treasury, by the U.S. government anyway, of 139 million ounces of fine silver. And one of the senators decided it wasn't worth much. Why don't we coin it? And that's when the Silver Liberty, better known as the Silver Eagle program, started. And they started coining the silver and selling Silver Eagles. And they bopped through that supply pretty quickly. When they made the law, they mandated that all silver for the Eagle program had to come from domestic sources. In other words, silver that was mined in the United States. Well, they quickly found out as they're running out of silver to keep the program going. We didn't mine enough silver to meet even a coinage program. Think about everything else silver is used for, all the electronics and AI and stuff we talk about. So they changed the law and said, we can source silver for the Eagle program from anywhere we need it. So that's a long answer to no. They want it like the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to keep commerce going at the, let's say, commercial, civil person level. In other words, the citizenry, but primarily for the military. I mean, if you've got a real go, guess what? You as a civilian get to drive, twice a week. I'm talking extreme cases, and you know me, I think outside the box. So in a worst case scenario, what happens? We need it for war, but we still got to get food to the grocery stores. So you are not allowed to do your Sunday drive or whatever. So you get my point. Same thing on the silver side. We've got silver for, the Tomahawk missiles, all the communications. I mean, most of your military batteries are silver, not all of them. But and you're in hardcore, you want the most reliable, most dependable. You want a silver battery. What do you use for a pacemaker? Here, silver batteries. You're not going to use lithium. You're going to use something that works 100%. It's reliable. I digress. So there's that part of it. So that's separate from the other part about the export. China is not saying you can't export silver from China. China is saying we just want to be able to trace and track everything. That's what they want. They want to just get a handle on, because you're not going to stop a contract from, one of my buddies at XYZ Mining sending concentrate into China, having that sandy metal refined to 999 fine silver and not get it back when you already paid a contract and signed a 5-year contract and have the Chinese refine your silver for you. That's going to still take place. But what's taking place is they want to get a very strong handle on everything that comes in and everything that goes out. And so there's always been and always will be a black market, or you could call it a free market, where there's somebody in China that's exporting silver to India at midnight. I'm kind of trying to be a little funny here, Nate, but it goes cross border and it's not reported. It's not licensed. I don't know. And it's leaving because they're getting a better price. India loves silver, and maybe they're willing to pay above market price or whatever. So there's that aspect. So they're really just tightening up, not to say it wouldn't cause the supply chain to slow maybe or curtail it somewhat. But I don't, the extremists on the web, going back to the AI bots, that silver's coming out of China from here on is preposterous.
What do you make of the possibility of confiscation, or maybe not even confiscation, but prohibition of monetary silver? Do you think that's a possibility? I think it happened in the 30s, if I'm not mistaken, didn't it?
Well, they demonetized it and you could only trade silver as bullion. They didn't have it as. So, yeah, they changed how the system operated. I've thought about that. And so here's the case I don't want to have happen, but you asked the question, me, I'll be honest about it. I think we could, I'm not saying could get in a position where, let's go back to the strategic stockpile. We need it.
Yeah.
Now, if I was going to advise the federal government, I'd say, look, pay people above spot, no tax, and you probably get a lot of quote unquote patriotic Americans to say, okay, I'll sell half my stash to you. We need it for the war effort.
Right.
But if they come in and say, give it to us at the current price and you're going to go to jail if you don't, I don't think that's going to work today. There's too many Canadian preppers, guys like you, that have stood up for the truth from the get-go, like myself. And people that have silver and gold are aware of everything that's really going on. Mm-hmm. And they're not in that position to forfeit their entire belief system.
Yeah, they're not
So-
going to fall for the old bait and switch, $15 gold turned into $30 or whatever it was, what they did back in the early 20th century there.
Right. So that's the way I see it. Will we get there or not? I don't know. There are substitutes for silver. Some, and I haven't even read them all. I don't have time to read everything. It's gotten so crazy. But, graphene can be a substitute for silver in some electronic applications, but it's just uneconomic right now.
Right.
In other words, if silver's $100 an ounce, but graphene's $200 an ounce, why would you use graphene? You wouldn't. But there are possibilities. And then other things are like, there's nothing, you don't have silver. Now you've got to use $200 graphene. I'm just making up the number. I don't know what it costs, but you get my point. It's uneconomic right now. There isn't many substitutes for silver. And that's the beauty of being a silver investor or silver owner. And yet, as things get tighter and tighter and the needs get greater and greater, depending on the scenario that you and I are outlining, it could get into a squeeze, not as so far as a squeeze in price, but a squeeze of where we find it, how we're going to source it. And let me answer that a little bit better. If we're getting that tight, the government's going to go after the obvious piles of silver. They're going to go into the SLV with 600 million ounces or whatever it is. They'll go into Sprott's PSLV. They'll make some legislation and say, look, that pile of silver that sits in the Central Fund of Canada, which is a great place for newbies. You ask about new investors, where would you go? Maybe an apartment, maybe you're moving, maybe whatever. Central Fund of Canada is a good place. It's gold and silver. Right now, you're buying it cheap. Why is it cheap, David? What are you talking about? Because the net asset value of the gold and silver in that fund is mispriced right now. It's under the net asset value. So in other words, the true price of gold and silver is greater than what you'd be buying the fund for, at least the last time I checked, which was just about a week ago. Hope I'm not distorting this conversation. I don't mean to. But there are ways for people to buy gold and silver without having it in their pockets because maybe they can't. Maybe they're in transition or changing, going from Alberta to, Vancouver or whatever. I don't know.
Well, lastly, we've talked all about silver. What are your prognostications for the gold market in 2026? Because as somebody who's watched these things over the years, typically what people aren't focusing on is kind of where you want to look, right? And so if everybody's focused on silver and gold is only made I shouldn't say only, a modest 65% or whatever it was up last year, is there more potential upside in the gold markets?
I think there's more stability in the gold market. And the gold-silver ratio, even with that silver's been playing catch-up, still is favorable to silver, meaning that in historic means, not in David Morgan's mind, there's gold is still slightly overpriced. So the gold-silver ratio right now, Nate's about 50 to 1. And historic ratio in the last 50 years is around there, maybe more toward the 40. And so gold will be stability. And we could go back on some type of a gold, I won't say gold standard, but gold tie to restabilize the currency system, the monetary system. And that, I think, is one of the main reasons the central banks are buying so much gold. It's just sort of their ace in the hole. You know what? We want a CBDC, but it looks like it might not be taken by the public. There might be too much pushback, or there's too much inner fighting between the banking elites, which I doubt, but it could be. And the only way to reestablish a trust system is to tie the new system to gold. So I think that could happen directly, or my more studied view, doesn't mean I'm right, is they'll probably do a trial balloon with a non-tie to gold as a central bank digital currency or something along those lines. It might not be absorbed by the public, or enough wealthy people bow out or find a way around it, or just trade directly with real metal or whatever. And they have to implement a tie to gold. I don't think that silver will be remonetized ever. It could be, The only way to remonetize silver is to get it in the correct ratio with gold relative to its value. And its value in a high-tech society is priceless. I mean, you're out of business at Samsung if you don't have it. You're out of business at Tesla if you don't have it. You're out of business at AT&T if you don't have it. Your whole cell phone company's out of business if you don't have it. So where do you price silver relative to gold where an industrial demand is greater than the monetary demand? Pretty hard to determine.
Do you think that if the AI bubble fizzles out, they don't get AGI and it all just dissipates like the dot-com bubble, could that put a lot of downward pressure on metals?
I think it could. It could. I mean, it's in a parabolic move right now. And being a commodities trader for several years, I don't do that now. I mean, I do occasionally, but not making a living at it like I used to. When they go parabolic, I get worried. I don't care if it's wheat, corn, silver, or soybean oil. It doesn't matter. When it goes parabolic, I get worried. What's it going to do? Well, when they go up that fast, they usually come down just as fast. The problem is we're still, to my gut level, still in a repricing mode. Silver's been so mispriced for so long that we don't know where the equilibrium is, as we talked about earlier. And maybe it's 200. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 150, maybe it's 500. I really don't know. The bigger the number, the more I'm doubtful, but I can't rule it out. So we're still in the discovery phase. I think the best thing that could happen is for a market to get to whatever level the market determines and then fall back and reestablish a floor. Like, let's say we go to 150 and it falls all the way back to 100. Well, there'll be a lot of people that own silver that will, darn it, I don't like fiat, but I wish I would have sold it at 150. But now it's at 100, and it builds a base at 100. That kind of becomes the new floor.
It seems like psychologically that's where we're kind of heading. That makes the most sense. Knowing human psychology and numbers, like 100 seems like a fair floor for silver.
Yeah. And that's what happened in 1980. We went from $6 in January 1979 to $50 January 1980. It came down, but you know what the average price for 1980 was? $21. 300% greater than the all-time high a year before.
Right.
So if the all-time high was 50 and we settle at 150, 3 times the all-time high after it hit 200, for an example, are you going to be crying in your beer? I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would only, personally, I don't hold a lot of metals, but if I was worried about things getting unstable, I'd be looking at, prepping supplies or, property or renewable energy systems, kind of wood furnace, just something that I might have to use if, things got weird. People were at $50. They were starting to panic, sell, and they closed up their shops and, they didn't want to buy it anymore. And I'm like, this is what you've been preaching for years.
Yeah, right.
And here it is happening. And now you're freaking out. It's like, just keep cool, or unless you're buying ammo or guns or something, then I don't really see what the better option is here. Unless you're, part of Berkshire Hathaway and something we don't, then, you might as well just stay in and, ride it out. Like, what else is there to do?
Yeah. Well, that's the question. When people sell, where are you going to go? You want to go in the stock market that's overvalued? You want to go into real estate that's mostly overvalued? I mean, there might be exceptions, but they're hard to find.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, you're probably better off sitting tight.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just one final question for you about the state of the world. I know you don't comment too much on geopolitics or, domestic issues. Is there something that is top of mind for you at this point that is of concern above and beyond financial matters, or perhaps related to the driver of the financial matters? Are you concerned at all about the hostilities in Iran or Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan? Are these things that you factor into your analysis when you're giving people financial advice?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, tip the hat to Gerald Celente. I mean, he's correct. When all else fails, they take you to war. I also like to shout out to Michael Rivera, and I recommend all your viewers find it on YouTube. It's called All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. I think those are a documentary you ought to see. But to talk a little further on it, I was in the movie, the Four Horsemen film, and well before the MAGA movement, I mean, well before Trump was in the political class, I was asked during a documentary, and it's in the film, and it was a question, I forget the question, but I was talking about, what made America great. This is, again, way before the MAGA movement. And I said, well, we used to be great, but now we're inundated with the best food, the best wine, the best clothes, the best car, all this external, not superfluous, but in the long term, meaningless stuff. I said, what made America great was our integrity. That's what made America great. And I'll say it again because that's what's important. Right. And the reason that we got more investment than most any other countries is they trusted our system. Exactly. To be trustworthy, that we would abide by our word. And now what's our word? Well, I don't like, our oil's in your country. We're going to come and get it. What does that tell in the world? Oh, your $300 billion, Mr. Russia, is in our bank account? We just froze it. And what does that tell the world? I mean, this is sickening as a, patriotically raised, constitutionally educated American, that the only exceptionality we had was our word was better than most people or most countries. And now we're the opposite of that. It's more than disheartening. It's a stomach twister. I mean, I'm here to be me. I'm here to be authentic. I'm here to help. I'm not here to get rich. I mean, you can have all the gold in the world. If you don't have your freedom, you don't have anything. And I want to make that my last statement because that's what's more important than anything else. And I've got friends like you, and I've got, a family, and I've got important things. But it's more than a monetary system. It's what the monetary system means. It means truth in action. And we haven't had that for a very long time. And unfortunately, it's getting worse by the day.
Well, I think you make a great point. What made America great was this cultivation of integrity and trust, and people viewing it as a safe place to do business. And it seems like now the West is just expending any political capital that's been accumulated over all these years. And you can do that once. You get to blow your load once, but once it's gone, it's gone. And it seems like that's what we're doing. And we're going to have to, there will be comeuppance as a result of that at some point. What I worry about is the only thing that can really crash the dollar at this point is some kind of civil war. If people get spooked and they're worried about a real civil, unrest unfolding. I mean, I think if Trump would have actually got shot, we might be in a totally different world right now.
Agreed. I agree with you.
I just want to thank you for coming out. And where can people find more information about what you do? I know you upload to YouTube. You got a YouTube channel.
I do.
And you do have the Morgan Report where you publish blogs quite regularly.
Right. And then I did a documentary, the silversunrise.tv. So if you put that in the show notes, it's one word, silversunrise.tv. It talks about the control, manipulation, and stress of money for the society at large, and to kind of rethink that paradigm. Why are we giving these bankers so much control, and how important is money? Of course, it's important. We can't live without it. But it takes more of a spiritual look at the money question. Of course, there's the basis for all the stuff that you and I have taught for all these years for people that are new to the subject or don't believe that, nothing's better than printing money. What are you talking about? So anyway, we have to lay the basis, but we go into the energy question. And what if we had cheap energy or free energy? A lot of these things that, are discussed at, let's say, I won't call it Brave New World, Huxley's book, but maybe there's a brighter future out there than we are currently witnessing. And I believe that there is. But we need to get back to the integrity. We need to step up to, what is this UAP thing really all about? What kind of energy systems does the military got or the government have that we're not privy to? What if oil goes away and we don't need it? Well, I'm sorry, let's move on. That type of thing. So anyway, not to tout it too much, but 2.5 years to put that thing together, Nate.
Where is that documentary available?
Silversunrise.tv is for free. Comment section's open. You can criticize the heck out of it. I funded most of it myself as a public service. And I just want people to get on board with thinking. I'm not saying do this or don't do that. I'm saying open up your mind, take a look, and you evaluate what's really going on. I did it again in the context of the human relationship to money and what's valuable. Is it everything external of ourselves, or is it internal and what we project out into the world? And that's a question I think everyone should think about.
On that note, thanks for coming by. And guys, go check out Dave's YouTube channel and the Silver Sunrise documentary. Thanks a lot for coming out.
My pleasure, Nate. Thank you.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.